This episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast is brought to you in partnership with ministryleague.com. We would love for more people to discover this show, so please rate and review us on iTunes or your podcast provider. Feel free to share on your social media and subscribe at benandtravis.com for the free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living. Welcome into the Helping Healing Humor podcast with Ben and Travis. We are glad that you are joining with us today. And today is a good day. We are recording on a Sunday, and I'm currently in a meeting at New Hope Church of Christ here in Lauderdale County, Alabama, a place that Travis and I, our roots run deep over there. Our parents and many other members of our family started there. So it's been a good day for me. Travis, how's it going for you today?
Man, I'm just glad that they let you come back.
I am too.
They know us well. That's where I went to high school, was over in that direction. And I was there a few years ago, which means there's a lot of forgiveness there. So we certainly appreciate New Hope. Will, how are you, man?
Man, normal. Thank goodness. A lot of people don't know.
You have never been normal.
I am positive for COVID right now. So things look a little different in my house because I'm in a spare bedroom and giving air hugs to Amy as she runs through the living room each night. So hopefully getting closer to coming out of it. No symptoms, just really asymptomatic. So I've had it easy, which is good, but ready to get out of this cage of this spare bedroom.
Well, we hope that is soon. As always, we're just always blessed with such great guests, and today is no different. We have Rachel Engstrom with us today, and I've been reading her book or listening to her book, and I've just been blown away of how amazing it is, how thorough and how real it is, and paints such a vivid picture of something that I have similarly been through. But Rachel, how are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. I am blessed. I'm happy to be here. I'll tell you, in Minnesota, it's been pretty crazy this week because the smoke from the fires in Winnipeg have been clouding our cities in the air. We're on this air quality alert until Tuesday. So it's been very smoggy like downtown Minneapolis, St. Paul. It was so thick you could like barely see. It's been kind of crazy here. So we've been staying inside as much as needed, but yeah, very different from where you are. But
so is it cold there right now, or is it hot, or is it just in the middle?
Goodness, no. On Wednesday it was 98 degrees with 101% humidity. Wow. It's disgusting here in the summer. Then it's like -10 for a couple weeks in the winter too. Oh yeah. So people just assume it's cold here, but no.
I had to bring my dad up to the Mayo Clinic. So the only time I've been up in that area was then. And it was the day we were leaving, coming home, it was -20 degrees wind chill. So I was, here lately, I've kind of been wishing for something along that line because it is super steamy down here.
When you mentioned Winnipeg, all I could think of was a Ric Flair promotional when he says they're fighting in Winnipeg, and he's like, the Winnipeg arena is going to be on fire. And so, whether you're into wrestling or not, that's what went through my head. Hopefully everyone's safe in Winnipeg, but that's how my mind works.
I've been watching so much of the Olympics. I love it so much. The swimming, the track and field, all that. It's amazing, amazing, amazing.
So did you guys see the curling champions and how it looked like just a bunch of dads? Somebody had a meme about it. Looked like a bunch of dads that just wanted to get away from their family for a weekend and ended up competing in the Olympics. That's what they looked like. They were dressed like us, khakis and a polo shirt. It was fantastic.
Rachel, we would love for you to start us off in our discussion, just sharing your story. I don't want to use the word highlights, although I think the way that you guys attacked the situation you were in is certainly a highlight. There's been some struggle in your life. So if you would unpack that for us, we would appreciate that.
Sure. So as we've said, I'm Rachel. I moved here to the Twin Cities, Minneapolis, St. Paul in 2000. So it's been, as of this month, August, 21 years that I've lived here. I moved here as an 18-year-old from a smallish town in Michigan. Small to me was 40,000. Um, I didn't know one person. Moved here to go to the University of Minnesota. I studied cultural anthropology, and in my sophomore year, first semester, went to a friend's birthday party she was having for her boyfriend, and this guy showed up that worked with her boyfriend. They'd wanted me to meet him for a while, and I was kind of nervous about it. And he was 7 years older than me, a little under 7 years older than me. His name was Grayson, and we just hit it off from there. Next day, texting my friends, I want to know about him, and things like that. And we just had the most amazing relationship. So he worked nights, so I didn't see him pretty much at all, Monday through Friday, and then I would see him on weekends and would just be so excited and so thankful and blessed to be together. And when I was 22, a couple months after I graduated with my bachelor's, we got married. And then we had what I called like a space age marriage, meaning it was amazing. We hardly ever fought, got along really, really well. The things we did fight about were stupid things. We lived in a little apartment. The kitchen was by the bedroom. So he worked 3 to 11. So he'd get home at night and, he'd have dishes to wash, but wouldn't want to wash them because he'd wake me up. So I would passively aggressively, stack them on a cookie sheet for him to do. And after a couple weeks of not doing them, then I would do them, little stuff like that. But we were best of friends. It was just amazing. And when I was 28, I started having some of my own health struggles. I had these horrific pelvic pains, different things going on. It turned out so this is the summer of 2010. It turned out I had endometriosis. So I learned it's a reproductive health disease. I learned that summer and fall I might not be able to have children. At that point, we'd been married 6 years. We had, purchased the house, got the puppy, all those types of things. We were planning a family, thinking all that was going to happen. So this wrench is thrown in, learning, we might not have kids. And I went on an antidepressant because I was anxious, I was depressed. Just knowing somehow it's going to work out, God's going to provide with this, but still just so upset with that. And then it's the end of 2010 and we're thinking, okay, well, 2011 is going to be better. It's got to be better. So we have Chinese food on New Year's Eve and his fortune cookie says you're about to have a major life change. What that ends up being is 15 days later, he's diagnosed with cancer. He has acute lymphoblastic leukemia. And I'm 28 years old. He's 35, and he's a cancer patient. All of a sudden, I'm a cancer wife. So that was very, very interesting. He was hospitalized for the first 5 weeks in intensive treatment. I have 0 family living here. So that was a matter of working full time, then running home to let the dog out, then running back and forth to the hospital, being with him for a couple hours, having to leave him there. I have different, so I wrote a book called Wife, Widow, Now What? And in the book, I detail all this and I'll go into it much, much more. But, there are times where it's like, I can't make it out his door to leave him at the end of the night, or I get to the elevator and then I run back and then I run to the elevator and I run back. And it's just very bizarre to leave your other half there. It's not natural. Luckily here in Minnesota, it is freaky cold in the winter. So I would have to leave at night. I'd walk, they have tunnels because it's so cold. They have tunnels you can walk in through the University of Minnesota, but I would walk outside in the cold and it would kind of smack me in the face and sober me up. And I'd say, okay, God, I hear you. It's going to be okay. I'd call a family member or a friend on the way home for that 20-minute drive and just kind of detox what was going on in my life. Because when you are the significant other, the spouse of someone going through something this catastrophic, you really, in my opinion, you really don't have the luxury, and it's not a positive thing to let the patient know what you're feeling, your fears, your doubts, all those things. They have their own war that they're going through. So I would kind of detox all that, talk about it, and, just get it all out. And then I'd go home, love our cats, let the dog out, maybe watch TV for 15, 20 minutes before I'd pass out on the couch and be like, I got to go to bed, and then wake up the next day, rinse and repeat. So a lot of this time, it's kind of like, when you're driving and you realize you've been driving in kind of a fog, and you snap back into focus and you're like, oh my gosh, it's only God that kept me on the road, that I'm here, that I'm going. Life was like that. It was really tricky. It was really difficult. After 5 weeks, he was in complete remission, which means technically you're cured. However, you still have to treat the cancer. So he was in a clinical trial that was offered at the University of Minnesota. And we knew from then on, he was going to have to go 5 days a week for 2 months, then 3 times a week for all these months. And that was not going to be possible with me working full time. So my parents, that had been married for 45 years at the time, now 55 years, my mom was 65, my dad was 72. They said, well, we're going to come live with you. We're going to take shifts. And I thought, oh, good gravy. I do not want my dad folding my underwear, doing my laundry. I don't want my mom up in my business. I don't want all these. But it turned out to be, from my title of my book, Wife, Widow, Now What? I ended up being a widow. So all these years later, it's been 8 years since he died in 2013, which I'll get to. But this is like, as horrific as all of that was, the time that we had together, the experience, the war the 3 of us went through as soldiers with my husband, it was this amazing gift that we have that just bonds us, that just, my dad is 82 now, my mom is 75. Thank the Lord, my dad's more like He-Man. He's more like a 65-year-old than 82-year-old. So God willing, he'll be around forever. He's like, God could take me any day. He's been saying this since I was little. Airplane could fly over our house and a wheel could fall off, come through the ceiling and take me out. I mean, you don't tell a 7-year-old that, but that's what I've known. So it's just what I've known. But we just have this connection. And when I have the anniversary of the death coming up, or his birthday, or these different things come up, they're the ones that I text and say, today I'm thinking of it and thinking of you. And they'll say, yeah, I remember we got married at the Wabasha Street Caves, and my dad will say, I remember being decorating that cave with you, little sentences, things like that. So it's cool that I have someone to have this connection with. So when I brought him home, he was 6'2" and normally weighed about 175, 180 pounds. When I brought him home after those first 5 weeks, he was 145 pounds. And I was just scared. I wanted to bubble wrap him. I wanted to bubble wrap our house. It's like bringing home a baby. So he ended up getting so healthy. Of course, he's on steroids and different things throughout this, and little bit of a monster at times on steroids, as most people are. But I learned and knew, this is the medicine, this is not him. And throughout this process, I'm adulting, as people say now, in ways I never thought that I would. So I'm figuring out diagnosis, treatment, insurance, disability, Social Security. I am contacting his employer. I am contacting the disability department. I'm figuring out finances, all of these things. I'm also trying to update our community, do all these different things, because it's like, oh my gosh, she's sick. People want to know what's going on. So someone told me very early on about Caring Bridge. It's a website where when someone's on their healthcare journey, you can do a blog post, and everyone that signed up for it will get an email with a blog post. So I decided to write this book the year after he died. And my book, Wife, Widow, Now What, is in chronological order of the Caring Bridge post with Facebook post, because we had like a team, Grayson. Facebook post with when I'm navigating each of those things I just said, and life, and going through all this, I'm walking you through how to do all of it. So it's a step-by-step guide. So you can read it, you can understand it, you can, learn from it. So it was just really tricky to have to figure out all of those things, balance all of it. It was really like having an infant. I'm worried about him, but I'm working out in the community with mentally ill adults, and not, you have to keep it in check. You do not talk about your personal life at all. So, during those times, I'm just hoping, praying, knowing he's going to be okay.
So a lot of your work in the book was, in writing the book, it was almost like a therapeutic journal for you as you were writing it during the actual things he was going through.
Yeah. So what's interesting is I edited the book 8 times myself. I did it. I had a professional editor edit it as well, but writing it was really interesting because the more I did it, it almost was like the less I believed that it was me. If that makes sense. Like if I didn't have his name tattooed on my wrist, if I didn't have pictures or people that knew about it or those things, I might not even believe it happened because I've worked so hard to get here. But yeah, you're right. It's interesting because I write my journey in real time. So the first half of the book is during his illness. The second half is when I walk out of the room after he's died. And things happen in my life that I knew happened for whatever reason, but they were later shown to me why years later when I'm writing the book. And I'm like, oh, that's why that happened. So he ended up getting so healthy to the point, he's gained weight. He's got a full head of hair. We go to this stupid young cancer survivors conference in Las Vegas, and life is good. I'm thinking,
and that's the name of the conference, Stupid Cancer. It's not her take on the conference.
Yes,
but yes,
I'm curious about that. I was like, whatever,
That's
cool.
what I was thinking too. Yeah.
It's actually an organization for like 18 to 40, I think 40, 45-year-olds. It's really cool. So it's got all, and I talk about it in my book. It's got all kinds of advocacy to help this age range, which is pretty cool. So yes, it's called Stupid Cancer, but cancer is very stupid as well. I'm going to concerts with friends, kind of going on silent retreats. I'm not Buddhist, I am not Catholic, but I went to both of those different retreats, because I just needed silent times by myself.
The Buddhist is a great story, by the way. It's one of my favorites. It was so good. So be sure that's a great chapter.
Because you really do have to have, God gives you the gift of humor through tough stuff. So in August of 2012, unfortunately, he relapsed. His cancer came back, and we hospitalized him on our 8th wedding anniversary. And he had a bunch of chemotherapy to try to you need your body. Unfortunately, the only option for him at this point was to have a bone marrow transplant. So he was going to have stem cells from infant umbilical cords from newborns. You have to wipe out your entire immune system to be like a newborn. So he had chemo again and again and again and again, and it just wasn't working. And finally worked, and it was just incredible. On Christmas Eve, he was hospitalized on Christmas. On Christmas Eve, I'd leave him at the hospital for a couple hours and go to our church, and it's the Easter church sermon where more people come than ever. And he starts talking about this young man who believed in his faith that things were going to get better, and the treatment wasn't working and wasn't working and wasn't working. And, he spent all this time just believing and waiting, and he needed this life-saving transplant. And I'm sitting there and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is my husband. Nobody knows. And it was just amazing. He closed the service with, may we all be more patient like Grayson. And I was just thinking, oh my gosh, I can't wait to go back to the hospital and tell him. And God is just showing up in so many different ways across this journey. And then in January of 2013, he had early space age radiation to prepare his body for the bone marrow transplant. They mapped his body took neurophysicists 40 hours to do this. He was one of 60, 62, 63 people in the world at that point to have this done. And the doctor told us, his main MD throughout this whole 2.5 years, he told Grayson and I, there's only a 19% chance that this will work. I did not tell my parents. I did not tell my siblings. I did not tell anyone, because it was like, this is horrible. This is awful, but it's going to happen. God's going to take care of us somehow. I don't know how it's going to work, but it is. So 5 days before his transplant, I have another surgery for my endometriosis. So we're at different hospitals in Minneapolis. So then when he does have his actual transplant, we're both sitting there on our painkillers like, oh, I can't believe this is our life. The transplant took 60 days, but it took. And what's really interesting, if you're not familiar with bone marrow transplants, is you get new blood, you get new DNA. So you could have straight black hair, and all of a sudden you have blonde curly hair. Someone in his support group said I hated Mexican food. Now I love it. It's very interesting. There are all these cool things. Yeah. So he started to get red hair. He had really dark hair. He started to get red hair, which was interesting, and freckles. Unfortunately, his body started falling apart from the chemo and the radiation. So his lungs, his kidneys, his bladder, all started to just not function very well. He gained like 40 pounds of weight, water weight. He had to go on dialysis. He had a blood clot in his lung. He had to go on life support. It was 1 in a million chance that someone survives this. He did. He went from being on life support to being in rehab, leaving the hospital, learning to walk, doing all these things. It was like the most miraculous thing. Even the doctors couldn't believe it. We had churches from all over. My parents' winter in Georgia. We had Georgia, Michigan, Minnesota, all over praying, and he miraculously made it out. But then he went for one of his bone marrow transplant checkups, and they just weren't staffed to be able to help with some of his health needs. So he went back in the hospital, and then things seemed to be going well. He's kind of doped out over these months. He's cognizant of things, but also doped out, which his therapist told me is a blessing because you aren't aware of how awful it is. Like, he really didn't have an understanding that had been, 60 days, 70 days, 80 days. From the time he went into the time he died, he was there exactly 90 days.
What was the time span from when you first found the cancer to the time he died?
27 months. So 2.5 years.
Okay.
So it's
Gotcha.
90 days that he's like in the hospital, not leaving
Gotcha.
at all, from when he went for the bone
Wow.
marrow transplant in January of 2013 to April. So I got a call on April 17th, and he's calling me and he says, I couldn't breathe last night even more. They're going to put me on the vent again. And we say, I love you back and forth 6 times or 3 times a piece, so 6 times total. And I say, okay, I'm going to be there. I won't go to work. And he said, I feel like, I'm wearing one of those like World War II pilot masks. And I had no idea that was the last time I was ever going to talk to him. So I get to the hospital. They intubated him. So he's got the tube down his throat. He's kind of freaking out a little bit. So I asked the nurses if they can medicate him to just knock him out. And I have my dad and I each hold one of his hands. And then my dad goes to get coffee or something like that down the hall. And the doctors come to me and say, Rachel, I'm sorry. And at that point, I just know it's over. So they say, okay, well, we're going to wait till Friday to make a decision. And I think, well, great. Friday's my birthday. This is wonderful. So I'm sitting there. I'm like, I'm 30. I'm going to be a widow. He's going to die. This is not going to get better. There's a 0.5% chance he might get better, but I just accept it. And what's really odd is I have this serene calmness around me, and I can only credit that to God. But then on Friday, on my birthday, I turned 31, and then they say, well, wait 2 more days. So he actually dies on Sunday, the 21st. So over those 5 days, I have almost like this creepy calmness of just acceptance. And I learn months later, years later, this is because I was able to be with him. I was able to biologically see the body work and fall apart. So I later tried to find support. You think of how far social media has come just of like in the last 2 years. In 2013, when he dies, there aren't resources like there are today, 8 years ago. So I joined shortly after he died, like a young widow support group on Facebook. And there are women that their spouses get blown up in Afghanistan, freak accidents at work or car accidents or whatever. I believe my calmness as he's dying is my acceptance of the beauty of being able to be with him. It's horrible, but I'm there. I'm watching it. I'm seeing it. And that's closure I will need on so many levels. So I made a heaven playlist the night before he died on Saturday because I knew he was going to die the next day. It's our songs, our favorite things, The Cure, Joy Division, New Order, Ben Folds. Our song was The Luckiest by Ben Folds. It's tattooed on my foot. My dad has spent the last 2 nights at his bedside in a chair because he knew he would, instinctively want someone there. So my dad switches out the car. My mom and I get there. My dad goes up and I sit down. My mom goes down the hall to get tea or something. And I sit down in a chair by his bed, and the doctor comes, pulls up a chair, sits down, touches my knee and says, Rachel, buddy, today's the day. And then, at that point they have me sign the forms for stopping, water, nutrition, all these things. He had wanted to donate his body to the University of Minnesota. So I signed all these forms. When he first got sick, all these things I talk about in the book, because you need to know about the legalities of power of attorney and your healthcare directive and all these things. You know, a month after he died, I had all my papers in order as a somewhat, I mean, I had endometriosis, but somewhat really healthy 31-year-old. These are things people don't think about. I had it was his mom, his stepdad. His dad had died when he was a teen. So his mom, his stepdad, his aunt and his sister, and my mom and dad, we all took turns listening to his heartbeat, saying bye to him individually. And then they took him off life support, and I snuggled up with him, and, he's purple and really pale at the same time as well. My husband's been gone for days at this point in my mind. And I play our music and wait for his heart to stop. And he's making these really like animalistic sounds because he needs oxygen. And it took about an hour, and then he was gone. And what was interesting is his physician's assistant, one of his main doctors, right when I started to lay down with him, she said, "Let me have your phone. I want to take your picture." And I said, "Why?" And she said, "You're going to want to look at this picture," which I did, because days, weeks later, I looked at this picture, and it was proof of why I had to do what I had to do. And I would not wish this experience into my worst enemy, but I did it. He beat cancer. The transplant worked. The side effects killed him. So I've covered him up, and I uncover him, and I say, "You wanted to beat cancer, and you did." And I play 15 seconds of one of his favorite songs, "Love Will Tear Us Apart" by Joy Division. And I do a little dance for 15 seconds. I cover him back up, and I leave. And my sister's like, "That is so you." And then I leave. And my book is, the second that door has closed behind me, I'm Rachel 2.0. I'm a widow. So what now?
People want to say you're a cancer survivor when you beat it and you're done with it. But really what I've learned and had somebody tell me was, if you hear the news that you've got it and you're able to put one foot in front of the other for however long that is, whether it's days, months, years, whatever, you live to be 80, you're a cancer survivor. You didn't let the news paralyze you. And that's been, the parts of the book that I've been able to read, and I'm going to finish it. That's been the overriding theme is, hey, this is not what we wanted, but here's our response. We can control our response to it. Even in the reality of it hurts and it sucks and it's stupid, and whatever you want to call it, there's a process to dealing with it. And to be real. And I think that a lot of people are scared to be real. And that's one thing that comes across in the book. So Rachel, tell us before we close out, how can we get a copy of your book? Is there a better way to get it that benefits you more? Just give us our information on how we can get that.
Yeah, so Wife Widow Now is exclusively on Amazon. You can get it in paperback if you get paperback. On there, I have the budget sheet. When I'm talking about finances and these different things, you can actually write in the chart, different things like that. If you buy it on like ebook version, whatever you want to do, ebook version, you can actually click on the hyperlinks and it will take you to all the different resources to navigate things and figure things out. So you can find the book on Amazon, and then you can find me, Wife Widow Now, on Facebook and Instagram. And
I would say, even if, I felt like if I'd have been going through all that, I don't know that I could have read it. There were certain books that I would get, and I'm like, okay, I'll have to read this later. But just the footnotes, the practical stuff that you put in there would benefit anybody who is going and dealing with cancer. Even if you don't feel like you could hand it to a spouse that's going through it, you having that knowledge, I think, would be tremendously beneficial. And in that aspect, I can't recommend it enough. Thanks for being with us for this episode of the Helping Healing Humor podcast. Be sure to download our free ebook, 28 Days of Focused Living, at benandtravis.com and receive all of our Helping Healing and Humor extra content directly in your inbox. Until next time, look for us at the same Ben and Travis time, same Ben and Travis channel.